Hello and welcome to another week of HoloTalk. This is Frank DeFreitas, and I want to thank you for tuning in. We're coming off of a pretty successful week. Last week you may remember that we had as a guest Alan Rohde from the publishing house of Ross Books, who brings us the Holography Handbook and the Holography Marketplace. Alan also filled us in on something that many people on the internet found interesting, and that was Sony's new holographic camera, where it creates stereograms. It's sort of like a portable camera, and Alan filled us in on many of the details of that last week. After that interview was finished, before I put that up to the web for everyone to listen to, I went on to the news groups, not only the ones that are interested in holography, like physics and optics and laser news groups, but we also had the opportunity to go on to the photography news groups as well, because this is something certainly that would be of interest to amateur and professional photographers as well. The fact that they now have a portable device that could just automatically do holographic portraits for them. So I posted that information as well. And Alan, if you're listening, I just want to let you know that you've had the best show so far. The number of visitors that came on that Monday to hear your presentation on that camera was 1,133, which is for holography, and something that's as fringe as holography is. That's a pretty good number for one day to listen to this HoloTalk show. The previous record holder actually was Dr. Denton from MIT, and we had 1,114, so it was a close race, but Alan, you took it, 1,133. I believe the next day was 700 and some, and 600 and some, and as the week went on, it got lower and lower, but it was a nice turnout for last week's show. There's not a lot of information this week, and I just have a few things here jotted down that I want to cover with you. If you remember, a few weeks ago I mentioned that if you live in the New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. corridor, that there's going to be a laser and holography traveling exhibit that's coming into this area, that if you live in one of those geographical locations or along that corridor or a little bit on either side of that corridor, that it would be an easy trip for you to come out and see this show. The latest news I have on that is that still may need another week before we can release any information on that. It's still contractual arrangements have not been made in blood yet for this show, so I've been asked not to give out any information on it as of yet, which is okay, and as soon as we know, we'll let you know. I can tell you that it is slated, if it does happen and things don't fall through, for this summer, and it is a major national traveling exhibit for lasers and holograms. Now, the part that I'm trying to play in this, actually there's a number of different hats I'm wearing with this whole thing, but the thing that will affect some of the listeners is the fact that I'd like very much to have an exhibit of amateur holography to go along with the exhibit that will be there of professional holography. So if you're an amateur or hobbyist, then of course you know by that definition your main source of income is not holography, but you approach holography the way people approach photography, as a hobby. And this will include people out in the workforce and also students and teachers as well. If you've done a few holograms and you would be interested in having one of those holograms exhibited in a national traveling exhibit while it's here, the holograms won't go on the road with it once the exhibit's finished, but once it's here, drop me an email and let me know, and I'll put your email into a folder, and when this goes through within the next week or so, I'll contact you and we'll make arrangements to have one of your amateur or hobbyist holograms in this show as well, because I feel it's very important that the amateur and hobbyist holographer is represented in shows. Okay, to move on, another thing I want to follow up on is the Lightcraft story. If you remember, this may have gone back about 2 months. We had a story on here that there's actually a device, a laser device, which is being tested out at, I believe, White Sands Missile Range, which launches vehicles into space using laser light. And this is not science fiction. This is absolutely true. This is a joint project, I believe, between NASA and the government and the Air Force. And I contacted them, asked them if they'd be interested in being on the show, and they did get back to me, and they said that they would, and that they were going to have an announcement to make possibly by the end of February and the beginning of March, which it is now. So I'm going to let this go for a few more days, possibly a week, and if I don't hear from them, I'll contact them again and get them on the show, because from what I understand, they had certain height restrictions out at the testing grounds for launching these vehicles with the laser, and those restrictions may be lifted. So we'll get more information in on that. If you want more information on it, just email and I'll send that along to you. Let's see. Next week's guest. We have a surprise mystery guest next week, and this gentleman is a very serious and possibly one of the top collectors in the United States for holography. And what we're doing, we're going to have him on the show and have him talk about the collection that he has and some of his unique pieces and his pride and joy pieces. And I also want to talk to him and get some information and tips for the listeners that if they were interested in starting their own collection of holograms, how they can go about doing it. Now, it's tough to get started with a collection of holograms if you're interested in very serious work, because you can pay upwards of $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, I would imagine, for some of the better holographic pieces out there that have been created by some of the more famous holographic artists. At the opposite end of the spectrum, we have holograms that you can collect for virtually nothing, that you find out there in packaging and advertising and publishing. So we'll try and bring those two ends together and try and get the best of both worlds and get across to the listeners that if you're interested in getting a holography collection started, what's the best way to go about doing it. I published a newsletter for many years from 1983 called The Hologram, and one of those issues, which was the top request for back issues, was an issue which was called Antiquarian Holographica. And it sort of got into the issue of collecting holograms. So maybe we'll go back into one of those back issues and bring up some of that information as well. Okay, believe it or not, there were no emails and no telephone calls this week. I did get a number of emails concerning the show last week, Alan Rohde's presentation on the Sony holographic camera. Folks, I don't have any more information on it. When Alan gets back from Hawaii, if he's listening to the show, what I'll try to do is get in touch with him and find out how the listeners can get more information. And next week, I'll let you know about how you can go about doing that. In the meantime, I did get a listing from Dutch Holographic Labs that they wanted their link listed on my link page, and I went to their page to check it out, and they have a very interesting page. I would suggest that you go over to the link page and click, I believe it may be the top one in there, I think that's the last link that I put up. Click on Dutch Holographic Laboratories, and they have something which may actually be similar to what Sony is doing. From Alan's description last week, it sounded as if this Sony system was quite portable. And from what I had a chance to see, the one at the Dutch Holographic Labs page, I believe it was actually a table-mounted unit or something like that, which the Sony may be as well. But in case you're interested in following up on this holo camera stuff, I imagine we may get a few people left over from last week who have never logged on before. Go to my link page and click on Dutch Holographic Laboratories, and it may give you some sort of an indication as to what this technology is all about, because it seemed like very similar technology to me. In any case, folks, that's it for the show. I don't have anything to cover. Next week we'll have a guest on, so you want to log on for the guest talking about collecting holograms. And we do have guests lined up for the rest of the year. So I want to thank you for logging on this time, and I'll see you next week. Take care.